Hi everyone, I am your host Geraldine Anillo. We're shifting our conversations from strictly music directing to dealing with the kind of challenges and problems and issues that we are all currently facing with the COVID situation. And so I'm having conversations with professionals in different fields who can help us deal with different things, from financial concerns we may have all the way to emotional concerns. So today, to help us, I have a special guest. I have a therapist, Sharon Wilkening. Hi, Sharon.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. So everyone, Sharon has 18 years of experience in the field of mental health. She has a master's in psychology. She is the owner of Cambrio Counseling. That's with an S, Cambrio Counseling. She has been a full-time therapist since 2003. And it's shortly around that time that she started her private practice. And she deals a lot with topics such as depression, anxiety, PTSD, trauma, domestic violence, and substance use disorder. So we're going to be talking about what are some sorts of things that are going on an emotional level right now with all that we're facing, from, you know, the months of confinement we had to our job changing and not really knowing when theaters are reopening as music directors. That's kind of the more direct challenge that we're facing. So what I want to start with, Sharon, is there's two quotes from your website that I just thought were so applicable to what we're dealing with right now. One you said is, change is overwhelming for many and very uncomfortable. I think we all can relate to that. And then you say, distress, discomfort, and chaos can often be comfortable. Not good, but comfortable. I love that. Would you please elaborate on how that's possible?
Well, primarily with people who kind of grow up with chaotic lifestyles or have become almost accustomed to it, we seek it because it feels like a certain level of comfort for us. And so even when we're in it and we're distressed, that's our safe space. So rather than changing it and making the moves to shift to new behaviors, we just kind of sit in the discomfort, in the chaos, because it's normalized for us. And it doesn't necessarily have to be growing up in chaos. It can be exactly what we're experiencing right now, which is very new for all of us therapists as well, to help people navigate kind of this communal grief and loss and change of identity and crisis that we're all dealing with right now. So that's what I mean by being comfortable in the chaos.
So what are some of the issues that you've seen in your practice that people, you know, from what I've experienced, it looks like there's some people are having a lot of anger, some people are having a lot of hopelessness, some people are very much like in action. What are the things that you've seen, and what are some ways that people can work through them?
So what I'm seeing primarily right now, especially within the last month or so, because we've had such a lengthy period of confinement, is that people are not understanding what they're feeling right now. And they're experiencing new emotions that they haven't felt before. And had it been maybe like one giant crisis all at once that happened, you know, maybe a car accident, let's say, you would know why you were experiencing those things. But right now it's been this slow increase of, you know, conflict, loss of identity, loss of community, maybe economic issues. Primarily in your industry, I would imagine that loss of identity is huge. Like, who am I now without being in this industry, in this musician or actor or whatever it may be? And now what does that mean for you? And that's something you never thought you would have to experience, and probably something that you've really kind of strive for your entire life. And now what's next? And that's something we don't predict, but everyone's experiencing it at once. And our anxiety levels have slowly increased over time until we're at this point, maybe where we've hit our breaking point, but don't really understand why. Because it wasn't a giant crisis, we're not giving ourselves the space to experience that. And our routines are so different. You know, typically we get up, or, you know, you guys kind of go to work a little bit later, but you get up, you have a routine, you work out, you come home, you cook dinner, and you have these routines that are completely off. And our routines are what keep us stabilized, and those routines are gone. So that's a lot of what I'm experiencing, and people not having the motivation to establish those routines on their own without kind of that structure that's already created by going into the office or going into work.
That there's so much to all of this. So and I love it. I mean, it's so great. What are some things you said it's important to give ourselves the space to understand what we're feeling? And I feel like that advice is so important, but also where is the line? Where is the line between someone who, will be on their sofa and kind of feeling down? Is that giving yourself some space, or is giving yourself some space like, okay, now I have an hour to feel bad? Or is also giving yourself this space just feeling bad? Or what is that famous space everybody's talking about? What is it? How do we do it right?
I think it's space and grace. That would be the two that I would like to say. And it's different for everybody. I think when you get to the point where you're just not doing anything and you're being very sedentary, you kind of have to force yourself to do those things. And what I am always recommending is accountability. Be accountable to someone. If you tell, your best friend that I'm going to start eating healthier, I'm going to work out 3 days a week, and I'm going to get up at 9 o'clock in the morning, then have your friend make you accountable for that, because we don't have, we're not checking in on a time clock anymore. We're not getting in the car and driving to work and then having to pick the kids up from school. So there just are so many things that are different, and we as a society have never had to experience this. And again, as therapists, we're learning as we go too, because this is a new experience for us, how to help people through it. So the line is probably where you start to feel like you've been on the couch longer than you should have. Get yourself up. And I know it's hard, but be accountable to someone.
Well, and where's the line where people can know that they have not given themselves the space they need? And is there room for people who are feeling bad on their sofa who are also not giving themselves space?
Absolutely. Because if you're distracting yourself with all kinds of other extraneous factors and not really kind of looking introspectively and trying to see, okay, what am I experiencing? Naming the emotions and figuring out what things are causing those emotions. Because I've named some, but everybody has different reasons why they're feeling the way they do. Maybe there's a marriage breakup or a relationship breakup. Maybe the kids are struggling more than maybe what you think they should be. Maybe you've lost your job. So really kind of look at those things and see what it is that you're personally experiencing, understand the emotions that are associated with it, write it down. That I absolutely recommend, because otherwise it spins up here the whole time. And if you write it down, it takes it out of that space. It puts words on paper, and that sometimes can make it a little bit easier. I wish I had the answer for you, but I really don't. I think if you have people in your world that are kind of starting to get concerned about you, then you've probably not given yourself you're not doing the self-care you should be doing. But if you're distracting yourself with all of these outside things and not really internalizing or looking inward, then you're probably not doing the things you need to do. So meditation, just take the time to be quiet rather than have these distractions. Guided meditation is something I always recommend, and that lowers our baseline anxiety levels. 20 minutes a day, guided meditation will lower your anxiety levels. Working out even 20 minutes, 3 days a week will get you back on track. And I'm not sure if I answered your question or not.
I think you did. There's no rules here. We go on a conversation and we see where it takes us, and we trust the process. It's like improvising music or improvising with words. Part of what I was thinking about when you were saying about the people that have emotions related to maybe their children aren't doing as well as they thought, or maybe they themselves are going through different things, is, you can feel like you have this feeling of about something and you know what it is, but if you don't have control over it, say you're angry because theaters are closed. Mm-hmm. Well, what do? You know what you're feeling. You've given yourself the space to feel that you're angry about it, but so what now? I mean, theaters are still not reopening. There's still no solution. So how does that information help us with anything? And what do we do with this anger that we know why it's there, but we don't know what to do with?
The same things I just suggested. Journal about it, write about it. And I know that sounds corny to some people, but it does help to get it out of your head. And understand that this is a grieving process. We as a society right now are grieving the loss of the community we know, Economically, we are grieving, certain aspects of our own personal finances, as well as just what is the world going to look like when we're in a different space, because we're not going to be through this anytime soon. So it's grief. And just like with any grief, we have to go through the stages, and it's going to change day to day. One day you might be in denial, the next day you might be, okay, I've got this, I'm accepting this, and you'll be able to find some action in that. But don't judge yourself if you fall back into maybe a depression or anxiety. Just, you have to learn how to live with this very livable grief. It's not like a death. It's not, similar to that type of loss, and it's not linear, and it's continuously evolving. So none of us really know how to experience that in the right way. So I suggest trying different things, reading books, reading self-help books, doing, I know people here in North Carolina are doing outside yoga with social distancing, or just exercising in that way. That way you've got your community, in a sense, not maybe in the same way you're used to, no hugging, no touching, any of that. That's another loss that we have, like human contact. We don't have that as much as we did, pre-March. And that's a huge loss, because just the act of hugging someone or being in contact with someone triggers those neurotransmitters in our brains that make us happy. So we've lost that too. There's so many things that are involved in this pandemic for us, emotionally, economically, socially, financially. I mean, every aspect of our lives have been affected by it. And I think as an individual, you have to figure out which one you're going to tackle first, but you have to tackle something, because you can't just stay frozen.
It's interesting, because to me, grief is when you've lost something forever. And to me, it's like, well, theaters are going to reopen, like music directors will be music directing again unless they decide not to. And so it's like, it's interesting to think of it as grief for something that is temporary, but is it still the same process as quote unquote regular grief, something that you lose forever?
Absolutely. People, and it's like I say, it's a livable grief. So it's alive and evolving and changing, but we're going to have the impacts of this for a significant amount of time on varied levels, depending on, what your experience is. But it's the exact same grieving process. We grieve the loss of jobs, the loss of relationships, children going off to college and kind of moving out of the house. We grieve all of those things, but it doesn't have to be a death. It's the loss of what you saw as your future, or what you've predicted as your future.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned that some people are experiencing denial right now. My question is, what's the difference between denial and hope? Like, so is someone in denial if they are saying, like theaters will reopen, if this is in passing, we just have to like hang on tight, and someone, is that hope or is that denial?
Well, I would say it's hope, because I believe in that too. Like everything's going to go back to a different type of world, but it's all going to go back. We're very resourceful, resilient people. And although some people aren't feeling it right now, we are, and we'll make the things happen that we need to make happen. Some people will not, but the majority of us will, especially those who are seeking mental health treatment and, doing the things they need to be doing. You want to get beyond this. Denial is when, and you've probably seen this with people just denying the fact that this is even a thing. And why are we overreacting? And why are we in the stay-at-home order? And I'm not going to get it, so why can't I be out? So just not understanding that what we're experiencing is real, even if you don't necessarily believe all of the facts, because I think there's a lot of facts thrown at us, and that can get overwhelming too. So like with a death, you deny that that person is actually gone, and kind of continue to live your life as if that person is still present. And it's very similar to the pandemic, where these people are living their lives as if nothing's really happened. Although when you look around and you see people in masks and, social distancing, that's a reality check. And so people can vacillate back and forth. I'm thinking after this many months, there aren't a ton of people still in denial, but there's always a chance.
You mentioned earlier that for music directors, there can be a sense of loss of identity. And you were saying the main question at the heart of that is, who am I now? What are some ways that someone can deal with that question right now when we
Well,
don't know for how long that loss of ourself is going to be there for?
I think the key to that, and again, I don't have all the answers. These are very, it's new experiences for me too. So my suggestion would be your identity is not as a music director alone. You have so many different facets of who you are. And if you can focus on some of those other pieces of your identity, whatever that may be, that kind of stands out to you, and drive yourself in that direction, since right now you can't focus on being a music director, you can't focus on being a musician or an actor or something like that, because it's just not possible. So what things can you put your energy into rather than focusing on this loss? What I suggest to people a lot of times, and they have a very hard time with it, I want you to identify 20 things that create your identity, 20 different pieces. And there's some really easy things. I'm a mom, I'm a female, I'm a wife, blah, blah, blah. People can get those, but then the rest of them are a little challenging. And then figure out where you can kind of focus your world on right now. Put that energy into that and kind of see what happens.
That is so fun. I love exercises. So for me, as soon as it's like, oh, make a list of 20 things I can think of that I am, that sounds so fun. Everybody feel free to write in the comments some things that come up to you that maybe are a surprise or not. But yeah, I think even for us as music directors, we already have so many hats under that where, if you're a music director, you're a pianist, you're a conductor, you're a teacher, you're a coach, you're so many things. And we joke that we're therapists, although obviously next to you, real therapists, we're not. But sometimes we try our best with the people we coach. There's another quote you have on your website that I love. You said, the healthiest people are those who can acknowledge that they can't do it alone. What does that look like right now? Because for some people who have been in quarantine together with like the same people in the same house, they're not alone enough. And so how does that work in this current context, not going it alone?
I think you're 100% right. And I do hear that from some of my people who, obviously adore their families, but have had enough of their families. Finding ways like this, and I know it's not ideal, but finding ways to connect virtually, and people will complain about it, but it's still connection. There's the group Zoom meetings that you can have with friends, and there's even games you can play online with friends. It's not a perfect world, but we have to learn how to evolve and be resilient and be committed to making those connections, because you can fall into that space of, I don't want to do it virtually. I want to see people in person, which is kind of like a child throwing a temper tantrum. We can't do that. So let's figure out what we can do and be really creative. And I do suggest that that you see the person. People are doing phone calls, that's awesome. But if you're not seeing the person and seeing body language and seeing facial expression, we're losing a piece of what makes us connect or helps us connect. If you notice when you're seeing people out and they have masks on, and how many times have you smiled at someone or tried to say hi and they can't hear you? That's what we lose when we're on the phone, or whatever we've got that's kind of blocking us from seeing that person. So if you can connect that way with people outside of your world, that's great. And of course, people are doing, various things like social distancing get-togethers, as long as they're 6 feet apart, being able to see another human, that can help as well. And in terms of your alone time, if people can find a space within their home, really just tell their family, I just need an hour or 2, or maybe even 6 hours to myself. That's okay. When I talk about needing to give yourself that space to experience the emotions, if you're feeling like I have, overload from these people that are in my world that I love, but need to be away from, I think there's so many people that are feeling that way, and your family might be feeling that way too. Take that space. It's about respecting what your mind and body are telling you, and we don't always do that. We're not always in tune to it.
Well, and that's the question. It's like, when do you let your mind and heart, like, when do you give it the space where, like, if you have swings, if you're like up and down, do you follow that? Because there's the whole thought of belief of like, you're responsible for how you feel. And so then it's like, well, should you just kind of be like, well, you know what, like I feel down, but I am accountable to my friends, so I'm going to work out. Like, you know, it's so tricky. So much of the advice is kind of contradictory. Like, force yourself, even if you don't feel like it. Listen to yourself. Well, which is it? And then you feel the tug and you don't do anything. You're just like, I don't know.
And then you feel like you're doing it wrong.
Yeah, no matter which one you choose. Right.
It's really about finding balance. And I know that that's not answering your question again, because it's still along those same lines. But if you spend some time with yourself and really being honest and genuine and giving yourself that grace and understanding your emotions, you probably can figure out what that balance is. We all know when we're being a slug on the couch and need to do something else. And we all know when we're working out and we're just not in it, or we're connecting with people or trying to connect with people and it's just not feeling good. Trust that and listen to it. I think, you know, we spend a lot of time in our heads, but just listen to what your body's telling you. If it feels sore from walking up a flight of stairs, probably need to do a little more exercise. And that will, you know, that increases endorphins. It just makes you feel better overall because you've done something health related. And, you know, do it with friends if you can, socially distanced, of course.
You mentioned earlier that as a country and as people, we are resilient. Is resiliency something that gets easier with time or that gets harder with time? The longer this situation carries on, the longer music directors have to wait until theaters were open. Is it going to get worse and worse and gets harder and harder, or is it going to get easier and easier?
I think it depends on the individual, but for the most people, that not everyone has a strong sense of resiliency or belief in their own resiliency. And that's the beginning of it. If you don't believe you're a resilient person for whatever reason, maybe you've been told that, maybe you have not been able to overcome things as easily as you thought you could, then that's going to impact your own self-efficacy. So believing that you can get through this, and we will get through this as a community, is a start. I do think that initially we didn't think we needed to employ our skills of resiliency because this isn't going to last long. Maybe it's not real, all the different things we were hearing. And now, and you know, I've seen a dramatic increase in the number of people that are coming to my practice in the last probably 3 weeks to a month, because people are recognizing that I need some tools to be able to get beyond this. It's not going anywhere. We have a new world around us and I have to learn how to navigate that. So that tells me that people are feeling more resiliency and understanding that they need help with that. They can't do that on their own. But, you know, some people will go the opposite direction, maybe feeling really, really great. I know this is going to be fine. It's going to be a month and we'll be back on track. And then their, you know, ability to feel like they can get through this is going to diminish.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I love what you're saying, that going to see a therapist and seeking the help is like actually what is resiliency. That is one of the things that you're like taking into your hands. You're like, okay, I don't have control over the situation, but I have control over like helping myself deal with the situation. It won't change the situation. It won't change necessarily how I feel, but I'm doing something to help myself through this.
Absolutely. But I also say on my website, and it's been my quote since I started practicing, the healthiest people are sitting in my office, because you can recognize that you need those tools. And yes, friends, family, all of that is wonderful, but they're also a little biased. They may not tell you the truth. They don't have the skills, the tools to be able to give you different avenues for getting beyond that. So it's always the healthiest pieces of families and communities that are seeking therapy, because it's a strength to be able to be vulnerable with someone else and be able to say to them, I'm really struggling right now and I need help. And just saying that alone is a huge start for many people. And then realize that it actually feels kind of good.
Yeah, because I feel like for a lot of people, and what I hear a lot is the hardest thing to deal with beyond, you know, the loss of job and beyond the, you know, the confinement is the uncertainty of when it ends. It's like if there was a sure date, then it's like, all right, I'm counting the days, we're going to get closer to it. But the fact that it's this constant moving line and we have no idea, we're looking at 6 months, a year, 2 years, a lifetime, like what is this? Right. That is such a factor in like not knowing even how to feel. It's like, well, if I know it's 6 months, I feel like I can I'm resilient. And if it's 2 years, I feel like maybe a little hopeless because now I may be looking at changing my job. And because of this uncertainty, I don't always know how to feel, like that's a factor.
Absolutely. And that's when you need to employ coping skills, grounding skills, staying present. And that's also, another conflicting thing that you're going to hear from me is staying in today, because we don't know. Like, everything is evolving and shifting and changing, and we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, next week, next month. So staying in today, what can I do today to make things better? What coping skills, what mechanisms did I put in place when I went through this job loss 10 years ago, or when I went through a divorce? Just figure out what those things were that helped you navigate through another difficult loss or another grieving, because you may not have them readily available right now, because honestly, our brains are kind of slowing down. And if maybe you've noticed, I know I've noticed it with other people, with myself, like, words don't come as easily because we're not doing the same things as we normally do. And so our bodies are responding to that. And there's also, so I used to work with near a military base in New York, and I would work with a lot of soldiers who had been deployed, maybe didn't see direct action, but they have mortars, they're in a war zone, there's gunshots going off, and they would come home and people didn't understand why they were struggling so much. It's what they termed at the time, I don't know if it's changed now, is adrenal fatigue. So your adrenaline is always up, 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 because you're coping with something. And then eventually our bodies stop producing it. So then you're in this low, and you're trying to find things that make you feel better, and nothing is making you feel better. So that's a little bit of what we're experiencing right now, because we've had so many ups and downs, not just with the pandemic, but with all kinds of different things that are happening in our country. And understanding that some of those emotions are coming from that as well. We can't always be in crisis mode, and we've been in crisis mode for a significant amount of time, even if it's a lower level crisis. It's not like you're having bombs dropped on you. It's like little things happening throughout the last 4 to 6 months that are just overwhelming.
Mm-hmm. I love what you're saying. So grace is very important. And looking back at ways we were resilient in the past and trying to remember that we've done it before. I know some music directors and musicians who do that because we're always going from show to show, and we give each other cards, thank you cards and all of that. And I know lots of people that keep them over time. And so sometimes you're going to do a show that's not going to go as well as others you've done. And you can go back and look through all the previous cards of shows that went really well, where you were very loved and you loved everyone. And that's very helpful to do that in the shows that aren't quite as good as those other ones. So that's something that might be fun, is to look back, like you were saying, and seeing past times of difficult crisis, whether it was sudden or that carried on for a while, and how we each individually dealt with it.
Absolutely. It's, really a lot to do with your belief that you can and will get through this. That may sound corny, but it really, if you think I have no control over what is happening in my world, then that's exactly what's going to happen. You're going to have no control. If you believe, here are the pieces that I do absolutely have control over, why am I not doing anything about it? Let me tackle one of those things. Because sometimes people get into this, oh my goodness, I realize that I'm not doing anything, so I'm going to do everything. And then it's too overwhelming, it's too much all at once, and then you can't do all of it, so you feel like a failure again. So one thing, whether that's eating healthier, going for a walk, calling a friend, just do one thing and see how that makes you feel. See if it's helpful. If it's not helpful, then you try something else. But don't give up. We can't give up.
Yeah, and for all the music directors out there, I know I believe in you. I've seen so many music directors from the get-go looking for different ways. They're like, we're going to coach online, we're going to teach online, change everything they've done in 48 hours, and still now looking at ways to help. And I've seen so many music directors really rally themselves and their community and do so much and do outreach and be advocates and just be so engaged in communities and in themselves. So I personally, if you're currently having a doubt as a music director, I believe in you for sure. And I really believe that theaters will reopen. We don't know when, but I believe they will.
Absolutely. Well, listen, we can't live without theater. We can't. That's the reality. And, the interesting thing is I'm down here in North Carolina, but there's a lot of New Yorkers here. And the number of them who are kind of like, oh my gosh, like we don't have theater. That's just unacceptable. So people believe in you and people want you. And so that's also hopefully will uplift you. It's not just your community that's really committed to making this happen again. You have a whole country that is wanting it back and wanting New York City as it's supposed to be, which is with theater and Broadway and music. So trust them.
I love that. That just makes me happy. We are wanted and people are waiting for us to be back. We will be back with a vengeance of creativity and commitment and passion. Sharon, thank you so much for doing this. Everyone, you can find her at her practice, Cambrio Counseling with an S, cambriocounseling.com. Thank you so much, Sharon, for sharing your time with us today.
It was a lot of fun.
Bye.